All right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Jonathan Gustin, and this gathering I'm calling Introduction to Soul Level Purpose Discovery. So I'm just going to really jump right in. I will show you a little slide that will show you what it is we're going to um, look at today. Um, sure. Well, that's a first. It's bringing me to new security features that I don't really want. Huh. Well, I've never had that happen. It's saying I have to quit everything in order to show you my screen. Aha! All right, I knew that wasn't true. Um, and okay. So there's a lot um, that can be said about this interesting and I think vital topic. But I'm going to keep it to four main pieces. First, I'm going to share with you a cosmology of three worlds of purpose: wake up, grow up, and show up. Wake up to classical enlightenment, grow up to being an emotional adult, is what I call it, and to show up with your life's purpose. And then I want to discuss the term soul because it eludes any specific definition, which is actually why I like the word. So I'm going to speak of it in light of the terms perception and the term imagination and the term place. I'll very briefly talk a little bit about the refusal of the call. It's my belief that most everyone hears a call, even if it's just a whisper, but that there are forces working against purpose. And then lastly, I'll show you a synthesis that I created called the Purpose Octagon with the 8 facets of purpose. And after each section, I'll just open it up to Q&A and discussion. So it's not just me, lecturing. In the courses that I teach, they're actually much more experiential, but this one's an intro, so I'll be speaking at length about some of these subjects. So I am proposing an understanding of reality, of our existence, based on a specific experience of sort of 3 dimensions or 3 worlds of consciousness. And for ease and simplicity, I'll call the upper world spirit, the middle world ego, and the lower world soul. There's many more names for each of these worlds. The upper world of transcendence, the middle world of our everyday personality and ego, and the lower world, the descendant path to soul. And I like having these 3 worlds because it helps. There's really just one human reality. Actually, there's just one reality, period. But in human consciousness, there can be, let's say, different journeys or different pathways. So I am, amongst other things, a psychotherapist, a purpose guide, and a meditation teacher. And they have overlap, but they're also semi-distinct in some ways. So by spirit or the upper world, I mean the journey that our everyday personality and ego takes to transcend itself and experience what is sometimes called enlightenment or unitive intimacy. So this is, the classical or traditional enlightenment associated with the Buddha or, some other sage. As a psychotherapist, when people come to see me, Generally, it's around the attempt to create a integrated, full functioning um, human being, making that which is, unconscious and make it conscious. That which is feeling ill or dis-easeful and bringing it into a state of equanimity. But today's presentation is mostly about soul. And for this spiritual journey, I want you to imagine that there's actually two directions. In reality, I don't think it's actually this way, but I think as a metaphor, poetically, it can be really helpful. That there's the journey to sort of heaven or nirvana, which can feel like an up and out. And then there's a burrowing down into our depths, more of a downward into the earth, where we discover our soul level purpose. So that's the three worlds. So I'll do one more section here and then take questions. So just feel into that for a moment. I don't want to just dump information at you. And it can be quite possible that a person partially or almost completely ignores one of these worlds. It's not incumbent on every person to go on the enlightenment journey. It's not incumbent on everyone to take the, integrated, full functioning human being journey of therapy, let's say. But there can be an ache to feel equanimity at the level of personality, to discover your destiny, what I would call your purpose, or to experience the freedom of enlightenment. So that's why I use this three worlds. Again, I don't get sick of saying it. It's not technically true what I'm saying. It's a way of describing human experience that I have found really helpful for myself and the thousands of people who've come to the programs. So what is soul? Right? I probably don't have to define, spirit so much or certainly not ego and personality. But what is soul? So I'm going to suggest three portals. One is soul is as much as anything an act of seeing, a way of seeing, a form of perception. So I'm not saying that soul is merely or only an object or an entity that goes from body to body, let's say, but that it's also a unique faculty of perceiving. It's a way of seeing the world through soul's eyes or soulfully. And how does it do this? I propose that it is actually a way of seeing through imagination, through images, through stories, through sensations, and through symbols. So to me, soul isn't just an activity or just a thing, a noun, but if I could play with words, I would call it a noun verb or a verb noun. Human language doesn't do it justice, which makes sense. So I also want to suggest that soul is imagination. In Sufism, there's a whole world that's called Alam al-Mithal. I translate it as the imaginal matrix or the imaginatrix. Henri Corbin, a Frenchman, he translated it as the imaginal world. But this is a Sufi, concept, although you can find it in other traditions too. So what does that mean? I don't mean the world of fantasy. If I imagine buying a lottery ticket and, I don't know, traveling the world in first class, that's a fantasy. It's a pleasant fantasy, right? Or we can have, the opposite, unpleasant fantasies. But by imagination, I mean something that is organically arising from what seems to us an unknown world. Artists and poets and painters, have access to this in a profound way. The best of them do. C.G. Jung himself employed a German word that I'll probably mispronounce, Seelenbild. Seelenbild. And he said it's a composite term meaning soul image. Just take that in. Jung was a genius. What if there's a thing or an entity or a world? It's hard for me to say the word exactly, but that's a soul image. Soul and imagination is part and parcel of the same thing. So, number one was that soul is an organ of perception, a way of seeing, mostly asleep in most people, but many people, of course, it's partially awake. Soul as imagination, and then finally, soul as place. Soul as rooted in the world, right? What is your place? So that can be an actual locale, especially if your people have had an unbroken relationship with a certain area on planet Earth for hundreds of years or even thousands of years. One of our guest teachers, Sherry Mitchell, lives on the East Coast, and her tribe has been there for thousands and thousands of years, obviously impacted by colonial settlers. But I also mean place by knowing what your function is. Like, what are you here to do? What is your place? My place is to midwife wholeness. That's my place. When I was 20 years old, I had a soul encounter, you might call it. I was doing a meditation retreat, just solo, in the woods in Northern Ontario, Canada. And I had an epiphany, a vision. And I heard two words. I'd never heard them like this before. And it said whole person midwifery. I guess that's three words. Whole person midwifery. And I knew instantly what it meant. And it came with a picture, a vision of a person like on a table and me being a midwife to a person's encountering their soul level purpose, amongst other things. So I'm going to stop there for a moment. So I talked about the three worlds. See if you have any questions. And it's absolutely fine to have disagreements, and it's not, this isn't theology. This isn't anything fixed. These are concepts, these are stories that I think can help. So please, yep.
I have a question, if I can ask. That according to Bill, yeah, I can.
Yes,
I don't
please.
know.
And everyone else,
Yes.
if you can mute, that would be great. Who's speaking
Are
though?
you kidding?
Introduce
Thank you.
yourself.
Yeah, and my name is Agnieszka, and I'm from
Okay.
Poland. And I lately, yeah, I was just reading to Bill Plotkin, and according to him, soul is connected into nature, right? And
Yes.
what's your idea about it? Because you didn't mention it's nature, and this is quite a very interesting concept for me. As you can see, I'm in the forest right now, and
Yeah. Oh, lucky you. Beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah, so Bill
Yeah.
Plotkin is a friend. He's been a guest teacher at Purpose Guides Institute almost more times than anybody, probably a dozen times, and he'll be coming again. And I recommend his books. I think they're works of genius.
Yeah.
So Bill talks about that so Bill Plotkin is an author. He wrote a book called Soulcraft, Nature and the Human Soul, Wild Mind, and the Journey of Soul Initiation, which actually we use as one of our books in the program. And one of his contentions, which I partially agree with, is that we are none other than a modulation, an emanation of wild nature itself. He puts it is in his own way, but this is how I put, this concept. We're not separate individuals walking on some planet called Earth, and then we go to Mars and so forth. I mean, obviously, we can leave here now and visit the moon and so forth. So when we talk about our purpose and our place, technically it's not. So we could say, using the story I just told you, right? I can't claim Jonathan Guston, little Jonathan Guston, the 57-year-old, living on an island, cannot claim to have or possess the purpose of being a whole person midwife. Rather, I, Jonathan, am a servant to this soul level purpose, which belongs to the wild earth itself. So I exhale. In fact, I get quite excited about this subject, but I think that kind of gives you a little taste of how I feel about it. And so to be
Yeah, thank you.
claimed by, to be used by a purpose larger than what the ego can come up with. My ego has purposes, which are fine. I like to have fun. I'm going to go see some music tomorrow, a soprano from Berlin. On Friday, I'm going to go see live jazz. I love music. And, I don't usually get to see it twice in a week, but I'll do that. That's lovely. But I wasn't put on the planet merely to enjoy good art. It's fun. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I have the money to buy a ticket. Um, but at the level of service, a purpose beyond self, that is the earth's purpose for us, or life's purpose for us, or reality's purpose for us. Bill is earth first, whereas he sees that consciousness is an earth phenomena. And whereas in Zen meditation and in Advaita Vedanta and other meditation traditions, they actually see consciousness being a priori and earth being a modulation or emanation of consciousness. So I just threw a lot at you. I think they're both excellent perspectives. And I think actually the best a human can do is see that this phenomena called reality can be seen from both views. Bill and I argue because he's an earth first fundamentalist, and I tell him so. And then he pushes back at me. And that's great. It's totally wonderful. But I think any description we have about what consciousness and reality is probably going to be insufficient to really capture it. So I'll stop. Thanks for the great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Time for one more. If something about the three worlds or soul and purpose. All right, and then I will proceed by putting. Where am I?
I think Ed had a question. He was raising his hand.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh,
Ed, please.
thank you. Yeah, what a wonderful talk. Thank you. And real quick, Melanie Goodchild, she's an Anishinaabe woman, and she describes soul as like soul is like a multiplicitous, like I don't want to use the word higher, but like a larger sense of self. That like most of our energy is soul, and then spirit is like this incarnation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I use it a little differently, although it's possible I'm misunderstanding what you're saying about her. I think of I think of it like this. I think kind of that consciousness in theological language, some people use the word God. There's sort of a resting state. It's self-aware. The Indians, meaning the Hindus, say Satchitananda. It has the quality of being, clearly, consciousness, and equanimity or bliss. To me, sort of the next layer is soul. It's soulful. That I do not know whether spirit, just in its absolute resting, because in deep meditation, I've had the experience of both ego falling away, and even my soul level purpose falling away. And all there is left is, I would call it fertile emptiness or the fertile void. It's alive, it's blazing with light, but the universe could disappear and there's not even a care. There's no one there to even care one way or another. But in the dream of consciousness, or as Thomas Berry says, in the dream of the earth, I love the dream. And by dream, this is really important. So if you're kind of tuning me out, listen, hear this. The dream doesn't mean not real. It is a true appearance. When I have a dream at night, it's a true appearance. My heart rate goes up or down and what have you. So it's not a diminishment. So this dream, and we know it will end. The universe, apparently, the scientists say, will end in heat death in a few trillion years. But for the time that it's here, I regard that the first level of the universe as soul, as the becoming element. So pure being also has another face, one face of being and one face of becoming, evolutionary love expressing itself. Sometimes I call it the ultimate artist. And so it expresses itself in this fecund way. Maybe there's multiple universes. I wouldn't know. And so to me, that's soulful. That's an act of say like you have frozen water. Well, it's water, but then it softens and begins to flow, right? And that's liquid water. And so to me, this is liquid consciousness, not frozen, but unfrozen to express itself. Well, that's how I'd put it. Yeah, but take it with a grain of salt. These are attempts at me using philosophical concepts, but mostly poetics to kind of like open ourselves up. We are multidimensional creatures. We're very young. Maybe we've been around modern Homo sapiens 40,000 years, Homo sapiens, I don't know, 200,000 years. We've got a lot of growing up to do. I mean, kind of clearly. And we'll get there if we survive this century. There's so much unused potential. We're mostly made up of unused potential. I'd be surprised if I use more than 5% of my brain. So I think I stole that from, I think it was, yes, it was Einstein. Someone apparently asked him, who knows? Everyone's attributing things to Einstein that he probably never said. But someone said, Dr. Einstein, how much of your brain do you think you actually use? Because, you know, he's a world-renowned genius. And he said, oh, I think I probably use less than 5%, which begs the question, if he's even remotely accurate, right? And not just the brain, but psyche, consciousness, but they use the word brain in the interview. What's the other 95%? And I'll submit that part of it is soul. Yeah. I hope that helped a little. Good.
Hi.
Okay, one more, but then I really should continue what I was gonna. Yes, please go for it.
I just want to throw the word and you talk about it or not, or maybe you'll talk later, but the concept of the soul and the oversoul.
I'm going to kick the can down the road. That's a good one. I like that a lot. If there's time, can we circle back on that? Great. Great. Let me. Okay. So a question I think that is natural and even appropriate is, okay, if this were true, and I'm not asking you to believe anything I say, but if a human being is so much more than their everyday personality and ego, and if part of that more than ego includes whatever it is that the word soul points to, why is it that so few people, right, in our circles seem to be aflame with their soul level purpose? Perhaps you're very lucky and you are absolutely surrounded by people who have been thoroughly transformed by soul. That would be terrific. But for the most part, even mature people aren't necessarily a flame. I just had dinner 2 nights ago with a wonderful doctor and her husband, a professor. And I just asked casually, to be honest, I'm like, do you love your work? Like they told me what they did. It was their maybe second time over there. And neither of them was over the top excited about the vocation that they were currently in. So if it's true that most people are not fully living soul, what's going on? So here are some forces working against what we could call soul work. Bill Plotkin, who we just talked about, calls his work soul craft. Well, I believe that actually our global culture is, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, soul illiterate. I grew up in Toronto, in the suburbs, and no one ever told me about soul. My parents never said to me at the dinner table, you know, secreted within you is a soul level purpose. And if you want to, you can attempt to discover it. What they said was, what do you want to do when you grow up? Which actually was a good question because after college, they, didn't want to support me anymore. And so having livelihood, a survival dance was really important. But Harley Swiftier coined this term survival dance and soul dance, or survival dance and sacred dance. And so I have a 15-year-old, and I told him that if he wants to, he can discover soul. So I'm attempting to create a soul literate culture just in my house. In fact, the poor kid, right? Here's my abuse. I made him memorize my favorite line from soul literature. And it goes like this: find the place where your deepest gladness and the world's deep hunger meets. I'll say that again in a moment. Frederick Buechner, he's a Protestant theologian. Find the place where your deepest gladness and the world's deep hunger meets. It's not enough just to do something that the world wants. That wonderful doctor that I met, the world really needs doctors. Actually, on Vancouver Island, we need a lot of doctors. I've been here a year and I can't get one. There's a huge shortage. So the world needs it. But then the question is, does it bring you joy? In this particular doctor's case, not as much as it might. So, how about just joy? Well, I enjoy playing music, but I'm a jazz drummer. But in truth, no one is going to pay me to listen to me play jazz drums. I lack an innate talent for that, being at that level. So this is if you don't recall anything else, I suggest that you commit to memory the line that I insisted my son learn. Find the place, right? Remember this notion of soul as place. Find the place where your deep gladness, meaning your joy, and the world's deep hunger meets. Competing commitments. Indeed, there are so many things that are valuable that are calling for our attention, right? The polycrisis or metacrisis that is happening. We can get lost in, the myriad things that need immediate attention. You've maybe heard the term, the urgent sometimes drowns out the important. So I'll just go to default purpose. So default purpose, not every purpose is a soul level purpose. So if we don't discover our soul level purpose, we will still default to some kind of purpose. Why? Human beings are meaning makers. We do better when we have a narrative or a meta narrative that holds us. even if it's just, low level, like earn as much money and drive the nicest car and so forth. At least that frames our life, right? So sans a soul level purpose, something else will click in, usually something delivered by our society. And if our society is not a healthy or mature one, then we're going to be in default purpose. And I think a lot of times a sign of purpose deficit are some or all of the following. So when I was, talking to that professor and that doctor, the professor said, "Yeah, I just feel like what was the word he used? A bureaucrat. Like the students don't really need me so much." And I thought, what an interesting thing to say, right? So sometimes, I'm not saying every time you feel work dissatisfaction, it's this. Overwhelming clutter. If we have a hole the shape of soul and we're not filling it uh, appropriately, skillfully, we will sometimes try to fill it with other things. And then there's some other things here. I'm not going to go through each one. So if humans are not living our individual and collective, but let's stay with individual, your unique purpose, then here's a question. What agenda actually ends up directing your life? If my son decides, dad's journey sounds like a cult, I'm not into that, then what will he do? What will shape his future? So this is the last slide for the moment, and I'll then take some questions. So here's a little thing I created. Again, not authentically true, but a way of perceiving narratives that humans live by. So column 1, default purpose. I call it purpose 1.0. This is a given. It's not created. We don't necessarily choose it. We inherit it. It's automatic. It's socially authored. That's not necessarily bad if what you're inheriting is of very high quality. But even if it is of high quality, it may not be for you. Now, the middle column, I regard this as an upgrade. Created purpose, purpose 2.0. This is a purpose or a narrative, a life narrative or a personal cosmology that's created by a healthy ego personality. It's self-authored, not socially authored. It's self-determined. It is personally constructed rather than inherited. I believe I haven't read too many of these versions of purpose books, but I've come across them, that the ones that aren't explicitly spiritual, you can sort of, create a purpose using like a self-help book. All right, third column, and this is what I built PGI around, Purpose Guys Institute. So true purpose or soul's purpose, purpose 3.0. So instead of given to us by society or created by our ego, this is a revelation through transpersonal means. It's not self-authored, it's soul-authored. It's soul-determined. It's a revelation. So I want to take some questions, but I'll just come back to that story. So I'm 20 years old, and I'm in a cabin in Northern Ontario meditating, and I'm taking some time off of college, but I'm going to go back. And I'm a religion major, And I'm asking myself, what am I going to do when I graduate? What am I going to do with this one wild, precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver put it? And so I go into a deep contemplation. This happens naturally. I'm not like, I will now go into a deep contemplation, but I really was. It was just took me. I was like, what am I called to do? And I remember there's a couch in this log cabin, and I'm lying on the couch and sort of sideways between periods of zazen, and this vision came. It was like a prayer to life, and that it was a revelation. I didn't choose. I didn't look at a list of vocations, and even if I had, whole person midwifery wasn't a thing. And then there's a recognition. I knew instantly what it meant, and I knew it was my, you could say, original name. And that is often, not always, often the quality of a soul awakening, that it feels like a revelation of something that you've always been, but weren't completely conscious of. So let me just take a moment of silence, a lot of words, and then we'll go to Sebastian in a second. Is revelation possible? I'm going to say yes. Are we open to it? Okay, let's go to Sebastian.
Thank you, Jonathan. Question about, the three levels of, or the three types of purpose. I'm imagining that it's not necessarily a linear process of moving from one to three from in that model. But I do wonder to what extent one should be aware of a constructed purpose getting in the way of revelation.
Yes.
I think that's where I am currently constructing something, because I think revelation is something that can't be rushed, that might be years away, but I do want to make change. So how do we focus on not preventing revelation?
I think it's entirely appropriate to say, I am provisionally going to live by the lights of this created purpose, knowing consciously that I have created it while I am open, right? Dating, you're not really supposed to be doing this, but in this case, yes, right? Well, I'll marry my wife. We've been together 27 years, but I'm really on the hunt for the A plus or the better. No. This is like, it's like taking a job. It's not the perfect job, but you need something. Humans are meaning-making machines. We're just gonna, even if people say there's no meaning to life, I'm like, okay, it's perfectly, reasonable. And then I'm like, so tell me what you're up to. Well, actually, and then they tell you, I really want love. Oh, that sounds meaningful to you, the way you're talking about it. So if we have only a little taste or no taste of the revelation of soul, then do our best. A person can live a really good life just through created purpose. I'm not some kind of missionary where you're like, if you don't make it to level 3 by yesterday, you're in trouble. That's ridiculous. We do not know in spiritual revelation or awakening, as I call it, whether it's, classical enlightenment or soul purpose enlightenment, will come and to what degree. In the meantime, what do you choose? Here's a day. Do you want to devote yourself to earning as much money as possible? If you want, but how about, like, I don't know, being as open and as porous to life, to be able to give and receive love, or taking on a project. So it's up to each person to decide what it is, or maybe it's just simply being. There are seasons when I'm going to go to a place called Salt Spring Island, and I'm just going to be. I don't have big plans. I mean, I'm going to do some writing, actually, so that's a bit of a lie. But sometimes like on a vacation, the purpose is very it's very different. It's not very active. So I think it's okay to admit there are seasons of created purpose and to embrace that. But don't tell yourself the story that your created purpose is necessarily all you've got in the tank. Maybe, but I'm going to suggest I've seen it happen often enough, including in my life, that one can really feel, oh gosh, this is it. I do the lottery test. So the lottery test is this. If I don't play the lottery, but let's say I did, and I won, a couple million bucks, would I continue to do what I'm doing, and how would my life change? Because money is very powerful. It's a very clarifying force if you do this thought experiment. And as I sat there with the professor and I sat there with the doctor 2 nights ago, I was like, oh, they'd be out of there. Choom. And I said that to my friend who works at, University of Victoria. He works in the computer department. What if? And he was like, I'd be gone in a second. So, okay. Now, I can't say this with certainty because I don't have a few $1 million in the bank. I think that if I had all that money, that I would do the same thing. I would go on nicer vacations and drink better wine. I mean, to be honest, and spend more time at good restaurants. So there would be some tweaks. I love this work. Yes, it's my survival dance, but it's also my sacred dance. That's a beautiful sweet spot, right? Because who's going to win the lottery? It's like getting struck by lightning. That's not really going to happen. So might as well, if I have to work to survive, I might also allow my, soul to thrive. Boy, that just sounded too cliche what I just said because it rhymed. Oh well. Thanks for the question. All right, let's go to Bodhi and Justin.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. In my experience, and this is obviously will be different for other people, but in my experience, the soul reveals itself very incrementally. Like we're not given the whole, paragraph or chapter. And for me, it seems as though that incremental approach, the revealing step by step, is a way to keep us in conversation with the soul. Otherwise, right, otherwise we'd have it all and we would forget it, I think, too quickly. So it seems as though it's almost like a lure to keep us engaged, to get closer. So I just want to offer that comment from my experience. And then the other thing I guess I have a question about.
Before you give the other, I want to reflect that because it's
Sure.
right on. I may have inadvertently made it sound like it's a one and done because I gave you the story, I gave you all the story of what happened when I was 20. But here's the thing. That was Jung calls it one's unique myth. Bill Plotkin calls it mythopoetic identity. So yes, there was a revelation, a profound one, a dramatic one, very young for me about that core. But then there was like everything else, like learning, like, well, what is a whole person midwife exactly? And how do you do it? And how do you get good at it? Well, it turns out I had to study I mean, I felt the calling. I was like, oh, I think I'll need to become a licensed psychotherapist, a lay ordained Soto Zen priest, and a purpose guide to begin to be adequate to serve this soul level purpose. Furthermore, I am continuing to refine or be refined by that soul level image by continuing to be in dialogue with soul. So just a few years ago, the voice of the universe spoke to me, but this time in the form of my wife. And she said, I'm a California girl. I've been here forever. You've lived in different places. I haven't. I want to leave. And I'm like, what? We have a fantastic life. We have a house. We have a community. Are you nuts? And she's like, no, I really want to go. And I'm like, oh God. And she kept talking about it year after year. And then finally she's like, no, I need to go. And so I said, well, all right, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to go have a conversation with Soul. So I went out into the desert near Death Valley with a group of people, actually with one of Bill Plotkin's teachers, Meredith Little. And I fasted and prayed for 4 days. And one of the questions I asked was, is it just my wife? Or is it destiny? Am I supposed to do it? That's a big ask. Like, let's leave and go to another country more or less permanently. Um, and I listened, and it said, go. And I followed. So I don't have exact plans, but I keep going out on these crazy things called vision quests. Even though I believe I know my soul level purpose, I know what, a tenth, a fifth? I mean, I have no idea. So there's so much more. If I live to be 100, I do not think I'll be exhausting the depths of soul. So yes, thank you. It's an ongoing conversation. Yeah. So using the wife analogy, I met her, I fell in love with her, but flash forward 27 years later, wow, she's even more than I realized. Furthermore, the intersubjective field between us it's either expanded or I'm seeing more of it. And if we're, long lived and we stay together, which I'm imagining we will, I imagine things that I don't have the maturity yet to see will come into view. Yeah. So thank you for that evolutionary piece, evolutionary conversation with soul.
Right. So I just have one other comment. I think the other distractor or resistance to soul purpose is that it requires surrender and sacrifice. You're giving something up. And a
Yep.
big part of, I think, what I've, had to look at is giving up that ego agenda,
Yes.
right?
Well,
So I think that that's an area of where people come up to, they might have that revelation, but then you have to engage with the revelation. And that can be very, very scary
yeah.
and require the letting go and the sacrifice of a life that maybe that had been comfortable and knowable.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to offer that. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for
No,
listening.
it takes a community. We teach each other. I think there's a real truth to that. In fact, the story I just shared is a demonstration of what you said, right? I didn't want to leave my friends that I built over 30 plus years in the San Francisco Bay Area, but my wife said I want to go. And I'm like, well, competing needs. What's going on here? And to embrace what then I discovered at Death Valley, this vision quest, to embrace the next instruction from soul required a letting go of, let's call it life 2.0, right? Or 10.0, whatever life that was I was leading. And maybe I'll be called again to a big physical move, but I might also be called to a very big psychospiritual move. Maybe one day I'll hear the voice say, done with PGI, that's it. You're over. Give it to the team. That happened once with me. I created something called Green Sangha. Green Sangha, spiritually based environmental activism. And I poured my heart into it. And then one day, soul, it was so weird. It just dropped me I had like endless energy to bring so-called spirituality and environmental activism together. And then boom, and it didn't say, oh, that's a bad idea. No, it's not a bad idea. Or that was a waste of time or anything. It just said next. And it was actually Purpose Guides Institute that sort of then. And sometimes you have to clear the field in order for those little seeds to come. That is very hard. That is very hard. This is the age-old metaphor of a caterpillar, poetically speaking, saying goodbye to all the caterpillar friends, going into a cocoon of transformation, liquefying, If this were a movie, it would be a horror movie. I mean, think about it. So I mean, obviously I want people to join my program, but before I sell you, let me also sell you on the challenge, which is liquefying isn't always easy or pleasant. Letting go of one life to make room for something more authentic. So yeah, I was scared to move here. And on certain days, to be quite honest, I don't have some sort of magnificent maturity. I still am like, what have I done? What did I do? Oh God. And that's fine. My ego is allowed to have a little buyer's remorse. But I actually don't think I made the wrong decision. All right, thank you. Let's go to Justin.
So two things. We talked about the letting go, and I also feel that sometimes there may be a taken away. So not the voluntary letting go, but the involuntary letting go.
Yep.
So that's just something to note based on the conversation you were having. And why I raised my hand was I was wondering if you have thoughts on the intersection of like the doctors that you were out with at dinner with, if they could align their sole purpose with the work that currently brings them financial resources for their family, so they
Yeah.
are enlivened
Yeah.
by what they do as opposed to having to shut one thing down to
Right.
do the other.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the second part, yes. So there's the delivery vehicle, which is the way we express our purpose in the world. And it may be if, let's say the doctor said, "Can I audit your course?" I said, "No, you can't audit it. If you want to take it, you can take it." She's really busy. Um, uh, let's say she successfully awakened to her soul level purpose such that she was satisfied, like, oh my God, I'm ablaze with it. I know what it is. It may be that her current delivery vehicle can be the lens through which she expresses her soul level purpose. That may well be. It could also happen, and I've had this happen. I've had a doctor, I've had a psychiatrist come and go, I don't know if this is really for me, and I don't know if I'll keep it. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes people go, actually, this vocation isn't serving me. I don't want to do it anymore. So it can happen that way. For a period of time, between the time that one awakens to their soul love or purpose, I'm always very careful to say this at the end of a program. If you feel you've had super success, please do not quit your day job within the first 6 days, 6 weeks. Like, slow it down. Eating is not overrated. Paying the rent is not overrated. I'm not suggesting you live homeless in your car. So there can be an intermediate time. Yeah. And also to your first point, I call it the abduction. Yeah, sometimes something happens. A health crisis is something I've seen many times, like an accident or cancer diagnosis. Also, divorce has been has cracked more than one person open to soul that has come to my program. But also, rites of passage that are natural and organic. Menopause for women. I was just telling someone the other day, it was my wife has had no interest in, not no interest, but not too much interest in my work. She's a psychologist. And then around menopause, she's just like, I just really fascinated by this work now. And maybe the timing had nothing to do with that physical change, but I suspect it did have something to do with it. So yeah, we are sometimes forced by life, by accident, happy accident, and also sometimes like tragic accident. Yeah. And there's more than a few poets who've, gone through war and something happened to them, what's that beautiful poet's name? I just forgot his name. Anyway, please.
Rumi.
No, I was thinking of American poet, Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman. One of the best times of his life. I mean, this is him saying it. Was being a medic in World War One. Like he just was like his particular way of. I mean, he bandaged people like every other medic did, but he just flourished. And I'm thinking, wow. I think I would just maybe be traumatized. It was an alignment. Interesting. Yeah. Now, that isn't to say it was his soul level purpose to just be a medic. In fact, it wasn't. He was a writer and a brilliant one. But that was one delivery vehicle for his soul work in the world. Yeah. Thanks. All right, one more, and then I'll finish the little presentation, and I'll have a little after party for anyone who wants to stay after we end in about 8 minutes. Okay, Zay.
Hi, Zay. Don't let the hills behind me fool you. I'm in Chicago, but I grew up around hills, so in my office I painted this mural.
Beautiful.
I'm really fascinated with the connection between true purpose and default purpose. I would say that with what we're given with society and with family, there can be so many like rotten roots in your inner landscape. And in order to actually have access to soul purpose, there is a terrifying process of completely rewilding your inner landscape based on what has been passed down, what you've inherited from your family. And if you have generation upon generation that has just let toxicity build up, and you're searching for healing, you have to encounter the belly of the beast of what you have inherited. And for me, it was a huge, I'm a Pisces, and so I'm more oriented towards water, but I had to encounter fire. I had to encounter like huge destruction and the disassembling of almost all my major relationships because of all the myths that I was built up in. And so I just want to offer that, because it can be quite discouraging if you have this inner yearning for soul purpose, but you are in a maze because of what you've inherited, and it's a very challenging process, and it takes great courage to actually face, to get to the next version of yourself. There's a huge letting go.
Almost always. This word indigeneity, what is indigenous to our soul and what isn't? So our families are our families, our tribes are our tribes, our culture is our culture, and we're absorbing it. And I can already see in my 15-year-old, he's beginning to reject it. And sometimes it's interesting. It's actually a little painful for the parent. I'm like, what? Are you kidding? I thought
I did so
hard to get here. And you're just like, but it's natural, actually. If you give them the freedom. I suppose there are some fundamentalists which you just don't have that. But speaking of fundamentalism, for instance, if one were raised fundamentalist X, Y, or Z, whatever the tradition may be, you can be a fundamentalist capitalist. I mean, you just don't have to be religious per se. You can be fundamentalist politically. You actually have to turn it over and ask, right? My parents were fairly progressive, liberal people, And I had to kind of turn it over. Now, it turned out in that particular thing, I was like, yeah, actually, that's me too. But then there were also things that were absolutely, I was like, oh God, no. No. And not even like, oh, you guys blew it and this is terrible. It's just like, it's not me. It's
Yeah.
just not me. When I mean me, I don't mean ego, I mean soul. And so
Yeah.
this weeding, I mean, it's a well-worn metaphor, but it's a good one. I'm no farmer, but if you want to grow corn, right, you're not going to let any and every weed, especially an invasive one. Where I came from in California, Scotch broom was everywhere. Well, and I'm told by the botanists that it's bad news for California indigenous species. It's not good. So sometimes you have to fight it. There are elements of our upbringing, our societal narratives that are unwholesome for us. And it's for us to determine what those are. I can't tell you. And some of it can be good. I think of Martin Luther King Jr. as like an outlier because like his father was, you guessed it, a Baptist minister and an activist. And what did the son become? A Baptist minister and an activist. And I read his autobiography 3 times, and I was like, I'll be darned. He had the right dad in certain ways. And so it's, I never met him, but I feel very clear that this was a man of flame with this soul level purpose. But I think it's quite rare for a son or daughter to be born to parents who are actually living their soul's destiny ahead of time. It could happen, but I mean,
Yeah, Michael Mead always says like the family doesn't know. The family
how would they
usually
know?
has no clue what the genius soul
Yeah,
entity is within the child. And
yeah,
I'll add to the landscape metaphor, it's not just a weeding process. If you're looking to rewild yourself, you have to learn what species of plant work well with you and find those areas and have a flourishing in that way.
yeah,
It's not just a getting rid of, it's also a learning what you need as well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Beautifully put. I'd love to continue this dialogue, but I wanna finish this last little bit. It was great speaking with you. Really enjoyed it. Where's my last slide? Okay. Is it still sharing? Oops. No. I'm gonna actually go a few minutes over. I said it was a 75-minute meeting, so I'm gonna go a few minutes over, folks. If you need to drop off, no problem. Okay. I don't have time to say much about these teachers. I just wanted to acknowledge that I am a synthesizer, and there are many, not just these 9, many teachers whose shoulders I stand on. Very important to acknowledge and honor them. All right, the last bit here. I'll just say a couple sentences. I suggest not regarding soul level purpose as a one thing, as a two-word thing, a one-word thing, a one-sentence thing. It's my contention that it's like a diamond with facets. So unique myth is in the middle. And then I mentioned delivery vehicle. So, if you order a pizza to be delivered to your home, it can come by foot, by bicycle, by an electric car, or by a Hummer. But it'll be what it'll be, right? The pizza that you ordered. But the delivery vehicle is a way to express and bring the nourishment of your soul to your people. So, if I'm correct, that my unique myth is to be a whole person midwife. The delivery vehicle, I don't put that on my business card. I don't have a business card, but let's say I got some more business cards. It wouldn't say whole person midwife. That just sounds so, I don't know, crazy. California. I would put, psychotherapist, meditation teacher, purpose guide. I mean, the first two are things that people would recognize. So it's good to make a distinction between different elements or facets or layers of one's purpose. In the follow-up email, I'll send you a paper that's a chapter in a book I was published, well, actually along with Bill Plotkin, called Purpose Arising, that I disambiguate these 8 facets. Okay, I'm going to spend the last 5 minutes explaining to you what the Purpose Discovery Program and Purpose Guides training is. And then I'll stop the recording and then take some more questions if anyone wants to hang out. Well, this is out of order, but I'll tell you about the guest teachers since they're here. So yeah, Michael Meade was someone was just quoted, right? The family doesn't know. He's the guy in the black and white picture. He's a famous, wonderful mythologist. I've had the privilege of studying with him. He's come to Purpose Guides Institute many times. And he's the one who said, the family doesn't know. That's true. I am a seasoned purpose guide. I could not tell you what my son's purpose is. And I have read more books on purpose, gone on more vision quests, blah, 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 than most people. So yeah, I love that quote of Michael Meade's. He is psychoactive. He's amazing. This is gonna take me forever if I keep waxing poetic. All right, I'll try to do it shorter. Bill Plotkin has been mentioned many times. He's the fellow with the gray hair. These 2 indigenous elders, Pat McCabe is the one with the glasses, and Sherry Mitchell is the one with the beautiful earrings. Wow. Indigenous wisdom. I'm trying to think of something adequate to say. I'll say this. I don't think those of us who are not, native peoples of, say, the United States and Canada or anywhere else for that matter, should, and I think it would be disrespectful, attempt to emulate in every degree or adopt everything from other tribes. That said, with permission, if you get the chance to be with Native American elders and sages, you're lucky. And these 2 are amongst some of the best. So these are master classes that augment the Purpose Discovery Program and the Purpose Guides training. So the program starts in September. I think it's Wednesday, September 4th. And there are 12 large group meetings, which means everyone comes together, however many people we have in the group. We start at 11:30 a.m. West Coast time, Vancouver, Los Angeles time. And we do it the reverse classroom method. And that means that before Module 1 on Wednesday, September 4th, a week before or something like that, you get the materials. The materials are me delivering a short, 20, 30-minute lecture. So you kind of have the lay of the land, cosmologically speaking. And then there's a handout, maybe 10 pages of reading. And then you do the practices. That's where the rubber meets the road, is the practices. So there'll not always be a guided meditation. And then I'll often ask you to go out into the wild, or at least outside, as close to the wild nature as you can get. So we meet on a Wednesday, all of us together, and then the next day or the day after, that is to say Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, you meet in a small group with usually no more than 5, 6, something like that, with a mentor, someone who has graduated at the very top of their class in a previous Purpose Guides training. And that, I think, is in one way one of the real beating hearts of the program, where you have a experienced mentor to track both the sort of epiphanies, of your experience, but also when inevitably you hit the speed bumps and the snags and the difficulties. So that's the small group. And so the reason why it's 12 and 12 is pretty obvious. Module 1, there's 12 modules, has a large group and a small group. So that's the bulk of the program. In addition, there are bonus calls. Between week 1 and 2, we have something called Receiving Images from Soul with one of our in-house master teachers. There's a class devoted specifically to the divine feminine in purpose discovery. And 2 of the guest, I call them sages, but just teachers, that I just shared with you. 2 of them will be included for those who are taking the purpose discovery program. And there are also pre-meetings, one in July, which has been recorded, and then one the week before our September begin date. So in total, the tuition it covers 31 meetings. And the early bird simply means that after one does the interview, which I'll discuss in a moment, if you make your payment within 72 hours, we ask you to go out on something called a soul walk, which is to have your very first discussion with soul under the auspices of Purpose Guides Institute to ask, would it be purposeful for me to take the program? I mean, you can even ask right now, just sitting in your seat, but my strong preference is that you take at least 30 minutes or way longer of going out and walking in wild nature. And there's a whole little recording for those who do the interview that I recorded that explains what I mean by a purpose, a soul walk. All right, last thing, and then we'll end. The Purpose Discovery Program is both a standalone program, but it is also the first semester of a 2-semester Purpose Guides training. And what that means is before semester 2, I want each person to do the following. 1, go through the entire program, right? I made 12 baskets of practices. It could have been 13, it could have been 20, it could have been 6, but I chose 12. And so you go through it so that you know each practice intimately through having experienced it yourself. So it's like being a Zen meditation teacher. You'd have to practice Zen and then teach it. Even if you know your soul level purpose or mostly know it, you still would need to take semester 1 so the technologies are deeply familiar and in your DNA. For those who are interested, and it won't be everybody, because not everyone should or would be called to be a guide, then we begin semester 2 in January, where you work with a couple of practice clients to deliver the very same journey experience that you did in September. There's some follow-up programs that you can see. I'm not going to describe them now, but if you taking the program is the beginning of the journey, not the end. And whether you continue your journey with PGI's support or not is entirely up to you and soul. But I just wanted to show you this roadmap so you would know there were options to be supported post program. Okay. All right. Nope. Oh, was that not sharing the whole time? Oh, no, it was. Okay. How does it stop sharing? No. Good Lord. There we go. Okay. So maybe before I stop the recording, is there 1 or 2 questions about the program? Oh, I know what I need to say. I like to meet with folks in small groups to hear a few minutes of their story and their, I call it the ache for purpose, to hear people speak to it um, in their own indigenous way. And so you're interviewing us and we're interviewing you to make sure it's the right match. This is not one of those programs. I know there's a lot of Zoom programs and so forth that you can just audit. Those are fine, but that's not what we are. So I just need to be upfront and clear about that. Because, well, why wouldn't I be upfront and clear? So it takes a fair amount of work. So I recommend that people have the fall and begin to kind of, what would be the word, gently prune back on some of their commitments. If you can't work a little less, I understand, but maybe it's a little less socializing, a little less, YouTube or Netflix, or I don't know what one does. To make significant space, like 10 hours a week. It can be a little less, but it's a commitment. And doing each practice at least once is a group commitment. So again, it's not an auditing type of thing. It's committed, and we are really like there every step. I'm there, and the mentors are there, and the guest teachers are there. So it's an intense program. So I'm not trying to scare you away from joining, but truth in advertising. It's the underworld journey to soul, if that's what you want to call it. I call it that. Is serious business. So just, buyer be warned. So, all right. Bodhi.
Yeah, a couple questions about the program. The Wednesday meetings, how long are those meetings? Are they an hour? Are they 90 minutes, 2 hours?
90 minutes with, I call it 15 minutes of spillage. So, and I did today. So
Okay.
yeah, 90 minutes. Yeah. So
And then the
if you
group
work, then
interview,
I just say to people, please just beg and plead with your boss 12 times to take that period of time off. Yeah.
and then the group interview, if
Yeah.
people want to go forward, how do you sign up for that, or how does that unfold?
I'll send a follow-up email. Hopefully you're getting my emails. I sent a couple of reminders about this program. I mean this Zoom meeting. So I'll send that within a couple of hours, and there'll be a number of times. You'll either meet with me or you'll meet with the interim associate director, Natasha. And either way, it's good to have a little conversation, because aside from the money, you're investing like your psychospiritual energy. So yeah, I like to slow things down. So you're not going to get a buy now button from me, because I don't want you to buy now. I'm truth in advertising. I do want you to buy, but I want you to do it only after careful, slow, deliberate conversation with soul.
And sorry, Jonathan, I cannot raise my hand and there's something wrong with my camera.
No
I just
worries.
wanted to just wanted to know about the timings, because we are in a different time zones,
Yeah.
especially for the small groups, and yeah, generally, like how does
Okay.
that work?
So the one thing that you have to kind of adopt to all of us is I've chosen Wednesdays at 11:30 a.m. That would be 12, 1, 2, 2:30 Eastern time, and I think Central European time. I believe that's
8:30.
7:30. Oh, it's
No,
8:30? Okay.
8:30. Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
7:30 in London. So
Yeah.
7:30, 8:30. Now the good news is that's the only time you have to adapt to us. The Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we have multiple times, AM, PM, and even weekend. So you will choose a time that works with your schedule. So that's
Okay.
easy peasy. Don't worry about it. But the Wednesday time you need to put into your calendar and make sacred. The group dynamic, the group container, people talk about this all the time, and I totally believe it, is a very powerful element, especially because we live in what I regard to be a soul illiterate culture. To have a place where you can come live, and we also have something called Mighty Networks. It's like Facebook without the Facebook craziness. It's our private portal, and so people really engage, and I love it. It's community. I mean, I didn't do it so that I could have community, but I like being able to go to a virtual space whenever I want to and engage with and interact with. We're communal beings, most of us. Maybe some of us are hermits, and that's okay too. All right.
Okay, so for the small groups, yeah, there is more options for
Many,
the
many
small group.
options. Yeah,
Okay,
there should be,
great.
yeah, there's never a problem because we do AM, afternoon, PM on Thursday, the same on Friday, and the same on Saturday. So, yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the program? And then I think I'll stop the recording. And then if anyone wants to stay for a little after party, you're welcome to. Okay, I will send the email out later today. And yeah, if it feels purposeful for you to interview us and for us to interview you in a little group interview, they're actually, I love them. Interview is a weird word, but it's the one I've chosen. Um, by the end, often people go, "Whoa, that was the best interview of my life." It just feels like a little community was made. So it's actually a very lovely and I think poignant experience. Okay, hope to meet some of you at the interviews, and thank you for devoting your time and your listening to this subject and being a little community for today. And if you want to
Thanks,
stay,
Jonathan.
you're welcome to. Bye-bye.
Thank you.